During Black History Month, we tend to think of large looming historical figures, people like Malcolm X, Dr. Martin Luther King, George Washington Carver. This year, for me, I decided to really reflect on folks who are closer to home. People like my grandmother, Marion Young. She came at gardening, as a very practical way. If you want to eat well, you better grow it. And so she had a food garden in her backyard, and she also grew fruits and vegetables in 3 different community gardens. We had a basement filled with preserves, pickled foods, all kinds of things to eat. We really couldn't go hungry even if we tried, because that is literally how much food she produced in her gardens. I believe we should do that and shift the focus, to a scale closer to home, to folks who are local in our actual communities, because to be honest, that's where change actually happens. Big changes often start very locally, whether it's in your neighborhood, on your block, organizing and working with your neighbors. And so too often, we think of the people who are in the history books, but we don't think of the people who are in our communities that we see every day. We tend to take them for granted. But those are really the folks who are making change happen. As just your average, everyday person who cares about their community, wants to see their neighborhood get better. And so for me, I wanted to really think about how do we celebrate, how do we recognize and really show, that deep appreciation for folks, in our communities every day. I think for my family is because actually my grandmother did play a small role, for me in the civil rights movement. I look at that thinking about she was a community organizer in her free time, but she also spent a lot of time thinking about Black people and food and how do we feed ourselves and be connected to land. That's something she passed down to me. And to be honest, that's why I garden, is because of, yes, it's fun, it's relaxing, it's great for your mental health, but also because it feels connected to this tradition of protest, this tradition of organizing, of building community, of being connected to other people. My children love the garden. They pick cherry tomatoes right off the vine. My son Julian thinks it is so cool to see the zucchini go from the garden bed into our zucchini pineapple bread. Charlotte thinks it's magical that the bees fly around in the garden and pollinate all the plants. And my friends just also love the fact that whenever they come over and they eat something, there's a good chance that parts of it came from the garden. So my garden has become this sacred space, not just, for myself, but for my entire family and my friends. For me, my gardening is a manifestation of Sankofa, of taking this family tradition that's in the past and bringing it forward to the present. Black folks have been intimately connected to this land here in America. We brought so much of what we eat in America from Africa with us. So whether that's yams, collard greens, sesame seeds, okra, watermelon, and we brought that with us in our journey to the U.S. And the food that we've grown on this land has become the foundation of American cuisine. You cannot tell the story of food in America and not talk about what Black people have contributed, created, and manifest. We've taken some of the poorest land and turned it into some of the most delicious food. The literal meaning of Sankofa comes from the Akan language in Ghana. And what it literally means to reach back and get it. And so for me, that translates in, taking what my grandmother taught and did, in her garden, and applying that knowledge in my garden and then sharing that with other people. And so it's about not letting the past, not letting traditions die. I hope, when my kids inherit this house, that they continue to garden, and that they continue that tradition and share it with their kids of gardening, of growing and cultivating food, which is something we've always done, that Black folks have always done, of being tied to land and turning land into food and being able to use that to care and nourish ourselves physically, and then to turn that food into meals that build community and nourish ourselves and each other spiritually. So when I think about, the legacy of gardening I want to leave for my kids, I want my kids to understand and really appreciate the fact that it's a long family tradition of ours. My grandmother grew up on a farm. My grandfather grew up on a farm. food and the food from our garden has been used to just bring people together and to understand that. When I think about why is garden culturally restorative, I think when you think about the history of Black people in America, we were kicked off of land. We had land stolen from us. In a lot of ways, like if you read about the history of lynching, it wasn't just about hate. It was about stealing land and wealth from Black people. For me, gardening allows me to feel like I am taking that land back and I am using that land, to sustain folks. Too often we've made kids afraid, especially Black children, afraid of gardening and afraid of land and being in the dirt. We'll be gardening or something and people will say, oh, that's slave work or something. But no, when you farmed back in Africa, when we came here, yes, a lot of us are descendants of folks who had to farm for other people. And then when we secured our freedom, the way that we secured the physical well-being of our families was from the stuff that we grew in our own hands, with our own hands, and with our sweat and with our effort. And I don't want my kids to be ashamed of that. And I don't want any Black person to be ashamed of that. Our people are of the land. We grow food. We taught this country how to grow food. Us and indigenous folks taught this country how to grow food. We were eating sustainably before that was the thing. Kale wasn't a superfood for us. It was just what happened. Collard greens weren't a superfood. You ate it at Sunday night dinner with your grandparents. We've taught this country how to eat. And I want us to be proud of that history, and I want us to be proud of what we bring. And so whether that's a huge farm, and if you're Black and you run a huge farm, or whether that's you're Black and you run a small, household garden, just know that you're partaking in a tradition that stretches back hundreds of years of us being able to leverage the land in a way to feed ourselves and create community. Each time my hands are in the soil, I feel connected to my grandmother, Marion. Each time I share my knowledge with, my friends and family and other folks, I know she's proud of me. And I know she's just beaming when she looks and sees my garden box overflowing with, herbs and tomatoes and just, all the things that I'm growing. Gardening isn't just a hobby, it's a tradition. It's a tradition of several generations of folks being able to express love, a love of self, a love of family, a love of land, and a love of Blackness. And it is something that I just feel so blessed to be able to participate and be a part of.